speaking about awareness actually makes me more aware about it, which I didn't do for a long time. And when you layer it down, it is fascinating to hear about it. We wrote a point that what we pay attention to is our life. And this also crosses the things that we talked about now, that when we pay attention to just the sheer presence of something is going to be determined by how you pay attention to it. This is really interesting.
A big part of how bad things are made bad because you pay attention to them. Hello, Patrick. How are you?
Hi, Alex. I'm good, and you?
Do you think that you are free to wish whatever you wish? I think that there are certain things that we wish to do or that we would like to do. But there's a difference between what you want to do and what you would want to want. Mm-hmm. I think that you can do as you wish, but you cannot wish as you wish.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's a really interesting point that you mentioned. Because let's take an example. You want to buy, let's say, a certain product. Let's say you want to buy a phone, but you know it's really expensive and you could really easily live with a cheaper one. But you know deep down, you just crave for that better phone, let's say. So you may want this more expensive phone because it is dopamine driven. You want you want to maximize your reward, and on the contrary, you can't just buy the most expensive phone because you're limited with the amount of money you have, or you just know it would make more sense to have a more budget phone. So I think you can definitely go through life with certain things that you just want to do, like you want to do it, and not have to think about two sides, which are dopamine driven and just long-term thinking. But there are certain aspects where it certainly would make sense to have this decision that you have in your head that you need to make every time you do, let's say, a purchase. This is just an example of let's say, a phone that you want to buy, and but there are other aspects where I think it would make more sense to be rational and look for a long-term solution, because long-term solutions are a good way to work through life, to have long-term goals and long-term steps that you break down into short-term actions to advance to those things. Do you agree with me, or have any disagreeability? Yeah.
There's certain things about your comment that I would like to maybe touch or push back on. Mm-hmm. I think that the thing about the phone is not correct. You can buy whatever phone you want, mm-hmm. because phones are not expensive. Even the most expensive phone, if you take into account not euros or francs in your case, and you think of hours of time that it took you to earn the phone, and you compare that to your grandparents and how much time it took them to buy all the different features that your phones give you, even if you buy the most expensive phone, that's probably like 2,000 euros. That's still ridiculously cheap in comparison to the amount of hours that it took your grandparents to buy all the different things that your phone can give you. And they couldn't communicate, they couldn't do many things that your phone can do now. So I wouldn't agree with that, but that's superficial. Your concept transcends the example. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's limited to this concrete example. And I think that the concept that you were explaining, that the ultimate thing that we're trying to seek for is dopamine. I think you couldn't be more right about that. Mm-hmm. I heard Andrew Huberman talking about with Anna Lemke in his podcast in the Huberman Lab about how dopamine is the ultimate value.
Mm-hmm.
It's the thing that everyone is seeking for.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only exchange. There's no more exchanges. Everything is subject to how much dopamine you're going to be getting. There's the euro dollar, there's the euro franc, Swiss franc, there's the different coins. But ultimately, you do not care about euros or francs or dollars. You only care about dopamine. It's the dopamine that you care about. So now we have to think of, what are we going to seek for? Long-term dopamine or short-term dopamine? Because I think that's evident that we seek for that ultimately that's the thing that we want. We want to feel good. We want to have a good experience. And good experiences, I would say, are highly correlated with the amount of dopamine you have, or even caused by the amount of dopamine your brain is segregating. So yeah, I would agree with you in that dopamine is the thing that motivates our interactions or our desires. So now we have to know and be able to discern what's the thing correct for us in the long term and in the short term.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is a thing that...
And that's where the thing about wishing what you wish it comes.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, I think that deciding what do you want long term and what do you want in short term is really subjective for the most part in your life. Just a quick question, because you mentioned it and I'm not really sure. Is there a thing as long-term dopamine? Because I believe what I've read so far is that dopamine is a short-term driven release that you want, because you crave dopamine, right? And the more you do things that release dopamine fast, the more short-term craving about dopamine you get. But is there a thing as long-term dopamine? Because if you, let's say, never drink unhealthy, let's say you never drink alcohol, soda and everything, you just drink water and tea, which is basically water, for 30 years, is then when you let's say live healthy in 30 years from this effect, is that a long-term dopamine effect or not? Or do you think it's just a result from your actions, from your discipline that you had in day-to-day short-term decisions?
Yeah, I think that long-term dopamine is a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that you're doing the thing that will maximize your well-being in the long term gives you an instant dopamine, because you're anticipating your well-being in the long term. And that is precisely the thing that we should be training our brains to seek for. If that's not the thing that we should be seeking for, or trying to train our brains to seek for, there's nothing that's valuable in life. Knowing the difference between what you wish and what you would wish to wish is the thing that makes you be mature and acquire wisdom and be able to correct our inherent failures as a species that we are. Humans are not perfect, so that we have to correct it in some way. And one way is by receiving feedback from what we are doing the things that we feel like correct in each moment, and then you know that wasn't correct because eating the hamburger was not good for you because you are fatter now and you are poorer and you have less time, so that you should have invested that time in doing some other thing that will be better for you in the long term.
Mm-hmm.
But taking into account and discounting that future well-being is not natural for us. You have to train in some way to increase it. Everyone can do it in some way,
Mm-hmm.
but I would say that you can improve in that a lot and be able to perceive the long-term benefit instantly by knowing that you're going to be better by going to the gym now and avoiding eating the hamburger.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I agree with you on that. I'm just, I'm still curious, because you believe that long-term dopamine is true. And what I know so far is dopamine is a chemical that you release. So if there is a thing as long-term dopamine, you would want to, or you could only release it in that moment. So let's say, I think you're not want to release, or you're not craving for long-term dopamine. I think you're craving, or you want to achieve a long-term goal that's going to release dopamine, which is also going to be a short-term chemical that is going to be a thing that you will experience in the future. That's just my perception of what I read so far about dopamine. I'm not saying you're wrong. I mean, it's just an experience of how you feel or experience the chemicals that you release, such as dopamine. If you want to experience or achieve a long-term goal to be fit, let's say the example as from your hamburger and workout. You mentioned you began the episode here with you can do as you wish, but you cannot wish as you wish. Would that mean that in the short term, you could rephrase that sentence? You cannot do as you wish, but you can wish as you wish. If you think about the hamburger, for example, because you cannot do as you wish, because you wish to eat the hamburger in the short term, but you cannot because you want to achieve a long-term goal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I don't agree with that. You're right in that you cannot do as you wish. There's certain things that if you want a hamburger, you can get it, but you don't wish to wish the hamburger. There's a difference there. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So you cannot do what you wish to wish, but you can do what you wish. I think that all our evolutionary desires can be fulfilled by our current environment.
Yeah.
Our society has been built in a way, as you said in the previous occasion, to give us the things in the most convenient possible format.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that you can... There's a big difference between what you wish and what you wish to wish. Mm-hmm. And that's where the incapacity of us comes. There's also, like you said really well, a limited environment. You cannot do whatever you want. Let's say I wanted to be in Australia now. I couldn't be. I have certain things that I have to do next week. I have to study. I have to keep recording episodes for the podcast. I have to do many things. So I'm not going to be able to travel to Australia next week, but I might be in some other time. So I cannot do as I wish. You're right. But the phrase doesn't refer to your physical capacity. Obviously, we're limited economically. We don't have infinite resources. If we had, I would be able to go to Australia now. But it's not referring to our limited economically environment that's limited in economic terms. It's referring to you can wish whatever. Mm-hmm. The thing that you can wish is anything. You're free in wishing anything. But once you haven't chosen what you wish, the wishing comes natural. You're going to wish the hamburger, but you cannot change that desire however you want. Let's do two lists. There's two lists that are completely different. One thing is your tastes. I like hamburgers, hot dogs, pizza, all the shitty food. I love that. And then there's other list which are the things that I would like to like. And there's salads, super healthy foods, going to the gym, reading a lot of books, doing exercise, doing all the things that we know to be positive for humanity in the long term. So that difference is the thing that this phrase is referring to. What were you referring to when you said that you cannot do as you wish? Because I think that you can.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. Do you think that the wishing itself, I mean, the wishing itself comes from desires, obviously, because you crave the dopamine, which creates those desires. Do you think that this can be, you can train yourself not to wish certain things, or that you can stop the desires that comes from this dopamine craving? Do you think you can stop those, or let's say minimize those desires?
Yes, I think you can. Mm-hmm. And that's the process of acquiring maturity. Mm-hmm. Being aware that your immature desire to eat the ice cream is not the thing that will maximize your long-term well-being, so that you say no to it. But the amount of dopamine segregated is subject to your environment and to your habits. So if you get used to not eating ice cream, you will not get a negative shot of dopamine when you start thinking of eating an ice cream. It's just like, okay, I can perceive the existence of some sugar entering into my bloodstream, and that would make me happy. Or not even my bloodstream, that's too abstract. Maybe into my mouth. I can get some ice cream, put it into my mouth, and I will enjoy it. I'm sure that could happen. But if you compare a kid and a 40-year-old more mature person, that person who's more mature would be able to do the rationalization of saying, the ice cream is not the thing that will maximize my well-being in the long term. And I know that. And I've been not consuming as much ice cream as I could have in the past. I've put a limit into the amount of ice cream that I've been consuming for the last 20 whatever time, to 20 something years, so that I could be fit, healthy, and more economically prosperous, because I'm not spending all my money in ice cream. But the kid is not thinking about that. The kid is just saying, okay, what's the thing that I feel like eating, whatever now? And that's the thing that I'm going to want. So, do you know the free will debate, in which I did a podcast with Jay Garfield debating the inexistence of the self and free will. So free will is basically saying that you are free to do whatever you want. You are not determined by cause and effect. I think that freedom evolves. Daniel Dennett has a book called Freedom Evolves. And I agree with him in that freedom comes in layers. The kid is the least free. Well, he's not the least free. The least free would be a rock, which is not aware of anything. And then comes the kid, which is all aware of his environment, but it's not aware of his awareness. He doesn't have a map. He's got a map of his environment, but he doesn't have a map inside a map. That's what gives you self-awareness, I think. And that thing is the thing that allows you to judge yourself. You're not only judging your environment in terms of what's the most tasty thing that I can eat now, but knowing that I exist in this world and that I am subject to the interactions with all the things in my environment, what should I do to maximize my well-being? Because I know that my judgment in many occasions is wrong. So let's say no to the sugary ice cream.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's the thing that gives you a superior layer of freedom than the kid.
I agree with you on the layer of freedom that you mentioned. I do not agree with you on your example of the maturity or immaturity of, let's say, that kid or that 40-year-old man. Because when you look at, I mean, there are certain, there are definitely people that are 40 years old and have their desires more under control. But of course, there are also people that are not in control of their desires and, let's say, are an alcoholic. Just an example. And is it immature?
Sure.
I don't think so. I think it there are other factors. Why? Because how do you define maturity? What I'm going to ask you directly.
The definition of wisdom that I like the most is knowing the long-term consequences of your acts.
Mm-hmm.
And maturity, by definition, has to have some wisdom in it.
Mm-hmm.
If you have no wisdom, you cannot be mature. So maturity requires applying wisdom to your life. And so you cannot separate wisdom and maturity, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
If you believe the opposite, I would love to hear that. Mm-hmm. I've never heard anyone argue against this.
No, I agree with you on that, yeah.
Knowing that maturity, or assuming that maturity requires wisdom,
mm-hmm.
knowing that you will regret eating the ice cream in the long term should come by the hand of saying no if you are a mature person.
Okay, then if a kid, let's say 6 years old, isn't mature, was or did grow up with parents that just said that ice cream is bad for you, you shouldn't eat it because it's not healthy. And that kid makes this decision unconsciously because it has been trained to eat something healthy. Is that 6-year-old kid automatically mature?
Interesting. If you happen to do the correct thing, are you mature, or are you just lucky to be imposed to do the correct thing? I think that maturity requires wisdom, and the wise person would be aware of what he's doing and why he's doing that. If you're only doing the correct thing, you might have been lucky to have great parents. But if the parents are truly great, they will instruct you the reasons why you're doing that and not just give you mandates by gospel. This is the thing that you should be doing and accept it. That might work in the short term, that you might have a super healthy and brilliant kid, but there's a superior layer of acting that would mean not only forcing your kid into doing the correct things, or maybe not forcing, but making him understand what the correct thing is so that he can freely choose what to do. And if he does the correct thing, that's virtue.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you on that, because just doing something because you're told to not eat the ice cream is a different thing than understanding why you shouldn't eat that ice cream. And that's what separates a kid from, let's say, a 40-year-old man, because he understands the consequences. A kid does not in this age, except if it's a highly intelligent kid. But I agree with you on that, definitely. And I think in this case, your desires and how you handle those desires, in the example of this kid and this man, in this example, is defined by your surroundings, as you said. And this also is a thing to design your surroundings. I mean, a kid cannot design their surroundings. It's just lucky to be in those surroundings that are, let's say, a healthy surrounding. But a man can design, to a certain extent, design his surroundings to avoid the ice cream. And I think luck is an open term, in my opinion. Are you lucky or are you not? I mean, to a certain extent, yes. Definitely. If you're a kid with great parents that, let's say, instruct you not to eat ice cream, you are lucky to have parents that are looking after you. But luck for me is an open term. Do you think as well, or do you think luck is a real thing and you are lucky in certain aspects?
I think luck is a relative thing. You cannot say you're lucky in absolute terms. You have to compare it with something. Are you lucky to be a person who has 2 arms instead of just 1 or 0 because you could have lost them in a war in Afghanistan? Yes, you are lucky to have both arms and both eyes. But are you lucky to have better habits than you could have had in the past? No, you had the habits that you had. So could you have had better ones? Sure. Were your habits above or below average? Well, that's a complete different topic, a complete different subject, but you could certainly compare yourself to the average and determine how lucky you are in relationship to that. If that's not the thing that you're using as a standard, what should be?
Well, I think forming habits, creating habits, and measuring habits to the average in society is a thing. It's why you set yourself goals. I mean, if you let's say want to live healthy, work out often to be able to have a healthy body in the long term, you're going to have to create habits, healthy habits. Let's say work out, eat healthy. I think if you achieve those, I think you're not lucky in that sense. I mean, you trained yourself to have those, to manage or to be in charge of your desires. I think this has nothing to do with luck. I think this has a lot to do with simple discipline and the way, again, how you manage and design your surroundings. Do you believe that, now that it has crossed my mind, do you believe that sometimes you're just unlucky to be in a surrounding you cannot change, or do you believe you can change every surrounding you're in?
I think that there's a part of the reason why you end up not changing or changing your environment is due to the belief you had previously of how much you could change it. So knowing that part of your capacity comes from how much you believe that you could change it, you should believe that you can change it a lot. But also you shouldn't delude yourself by saying that you can change it, you can change everything. Maybe that's not positive either. I have to think of an example in which you could be worse off because of thinking that you could change something and then not be able to change it. But in general terms, I would say that believing that you can change more than you actually can is positive in the long term. That's what I think that a growth mindset requires. It requires knowing that, or thinking that you can change a lot, and that there's more growth in the future than there has been in the past. So I think that I don't know how you could you separate luck from good. If you are, I don't see a way of separating luck from a good environment. If we accept that free will does not exist, and that we are just a subject to cause and effect, and as the rest of the rocks in the universe, or as the rest of the matter in the universe, everything is just luck. Every comment that I do is not due to an inherent property of my identity. It's just that the interaction of the matter that I'm composed of ends up uttering the words that I'm uttering in the order that I'm doing that. So is there anything that's not luck? Is there anything that you could say that, oh no, that's not luck. He worked super hard for that. Is working hard for something is discipline? I would define the discipline as wanting to do one thing and doing the thing that you want to want. So going against your dopamine desires of the moment. That's what I would define discipline as.
Yes, definitely. I don't agree with you on isn't everything luck, because let's say, I mean, we have to define, or we have to look at the word or the meaning of luck from another perspective. I think luck for me is something that is a component of circumstances you had no control of. So let's say if you just happened to be born in a very rich family, that could be, yes, lucky, because you are not able to control this circumstance. But I think luck has nothing to do with, let's say, working hard or discipline. I mean, if you want to, let's say if you set yourself a goal that you want to work out 5 days a week for 10 years to have great shape and a healthy body, and you actually never miss a workout and actually achieve this goal, I think you're not lucky. I think that's just a success from your actions that you took from day to day. If, let's say, there happens to be a way of just having a great body from the way you were born, then yeah, definitely this is luck, because there are people who are unlucky in this sense, who have conditions that don't allow them to lose weight, let's say. So I don't think that luck is necessarily just a component that's always into play. I think luck is a thing that how do I phrase this? I think luck has to do with things that happen in your life where you have no control of, and literally no control of. Now, where do you have not control of? Well, that's I think subjectively, but also a bit factual. We could go into that more deeply, but as of the point where you were born, a few years forward, as of then, I think less and less luck comes into play, in my opinion.
Okay, so you're basically saying that you are lucky to have the genetics you have or the environment you have in terms of your family, your parents, but you are not lucky in terms of the desire you have to work hard.
Yeah.
You are desiring to work hard and you are choosing to desire it. But how sure are you of that? If you had to choose between two options, okay, you're choosing between the two, let's say green and blue shoes. You have to choose between one of those two. But are you choosing to choose? You're just choosing. You're not choosing to choose. And when you realize that you are not choosing to choose, that you are just choosing, you realize that, oh, I wasn't the responsible of the pre-requirement for the thing that I'm doing. Did I choose the neural pathways that predispose me to have good habits? No, I didn't choose that.
Of course.
It just happened that I did have that. Okay, you could maybe go back in time to the moment I started choosing the good acts so that I started having better habits and then I could improve that in the long term. But did I choose to have the brain that will end up choosing to have the good habits? I did not. So it all ends up being luck, I think.
To the point where you are placed in a situation where you're conscious about. I mean, if you're placed into a situation with bad habits, let's say you're placed into life with bad habits for the past, let's say 20 years when you lived at home, because your parents had bad habits, you are also placed in a situation with bad habits. Yes, to that extent, it is luck or unluck, if you want to define by that. But if you pay attention to good habits, if you focus your life on good habits, or you focus your life to let's say politics, is the next result that you will be in, let's say you in 5 years after your 20 years of bad habits, you'll be in good habits because you read about them, heard about them, informed and tried and worked towards good habits. Or you never were in politics, but now you want to be in politics, so you pay attention to politics, you read work for politics, then you end up in politics. Those next results is this luck, or did you just, I mean, you chose a path to determine your next result. I don't think this is luck, or yes, I don't think it's luck, because you can choose what you want to achieve, and if you're really going to pay attention and do work towards this is not going to be luck per se. I think it's going to be luck or unluck. Can you say unluck? I don't really know, but you know what I mean.
Unlucky.
Yeah, you're unlucky. Let's say you're lucky or unlucky to be placed in a good or bad situation. But as of the conscious situation you're in, lucky or unlucky, you're able to change this situation or this circumstance that has nothing to do with luck anymore, because you're doing conscious choices that are going to change this environment, good or bad.
Okay, so I think that you are not debating the existence of free will. You're just distinguishing between layers of freedom. And the first layer of freedom, when you have no layers of freedom, you're not even able to choose anything. But when you have one layer of freedom, you can choose between either option A or option B. 2 layers of freedom would be you being able to choose. And 3 layers of freedom would be even more. But So you're basically, let me still mind your point. Let me describe it in the best possible way so that maybe you can correct me if I didn't get it correctly. I think that you are referring to the higher you are in the scale of freedoms, the more you choose, because no one would debate that. You're choosing between the two pairs of shoes or the two kinds of habits. Let's say I can choose between smoking or not smoking.
Mm-hmm.
If I choose not smoking, or maybe that's not as evident as an evident of that's not the best example I could give. But if I choose not smoking, I'm participating in a layer of freedom, or I'm being part of a layer of freedom that makes me, in a way, responsible of that, without going into the debate of the existence of free will or the self. The fact that you are doing something when you could have come to the opposite conclusion. Obviously, if you analyze everything to the level of molecules, you could not. You were determined to make that decision, sure. But as long as thinking or acting as if you could have done otherwise will make you act more in the correct way than believing that you could not have done otherwise, believing that you could have done otherwise, so that developing discipline and the correct habits is positive or is habilitated by the fact of holding those beliefs.
I think you're right about that, especially the point where you mentioned the layers of freedom also determines how free you can choose to change something or develop discipline in those cases. Yes, I think so. I actually never heard of those 3 layers of freedom. I found this really interesting how you described it. And do you believe that we are, just as individuals, not considering politics and everything else, do you just believe that those 3 layers all exist and we are able to live with them or act out of them or not? Especially the 3rd layer.
I don't think there's only 3 layers. There's an infinite amount of layers. Conversations and reality is recursive. I can think of what you are thinking, or I can think of what I'm thinking. That's 0 layers of abstraction.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm thinking, okay, that's 0 layers of abstraction. I can think of what you think or what I think.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 1 layer of abstraction. I'm thinking of thinking. Or I can think of what you think about what I think. That's 2 layers of abstraction. I could take this infinite
mm-hmm.
to an infinite abstraction. So the same thing happens with the layers of freedom. This has a lot to do with meditation. One of the points that we talked about, maybe talking about, in the sense of being aware that you are aware,
mm-hmm.
gives you a level of insight that you would not get if you're just acting
mm-hmm.
and experiencing your environment without abstraction. So being aware of being aware of being aware gets you an even deeper insight. And you can get this to any point. But knowing that there's an infinite amount of layers of freedom, but we have a limited cognitive capacity and that we cannot hold in our brains, I cannot think of 4 layers of freedom. If I start thinking, I can tangibly think of maybe 3 or maybe 4, but not more.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the moment you start thinking about the 4th one, in my case, just as an example, I stopped thinking of the previous ones. My working capacity, my working memory is saturated by the amount of layers that I'm holding simultaneously. So I'm not able to reason about a higher level than a 4th one. But even if we were, I think that it's not just 3, but what you were referring to, the higher levels of freedom, those, even if free will ultimately doesn't exist, that's the thing that determines the amount of discipline, or the amount of discipline that you are using or having in your life is determined by how far you're able to go in this layer of freedoms. Or maybe do you only need to go to the 2nd one? knowing that you wish to wish something else than you actually wish. Is there any benefit in going to the third one in terms of saying what I wish to wish to wish, what I would like to wish to like? That's a better way of saying it. What would you like to wish to like? That's 3 layers. Is there any benefit from thinking in those terms? Maybe not. So maybe all the benefit comes from just 2 layers of freedom. And the second one is the one that gives you like 98% of the benefit. So thinking farther is just useless. And so we should just focus in knowing that there's a difference between what we wish and what we would wish to wish.
I think the second layer you described is enough to create this kind of discipline to go through life, let's say. And I think to be able to think or to act based on the second layer of freedom comes also from being aware about it. And you referred meditation before, that I think that being able to be aware about this second layer of freedom comes from meditation. You get more aware about it unconsciously, even from day-to-day life. And I think this is a big part of meditation, that the unconscious awareness of general acts that you do gets more present if you look at it from a third perspective. That's what I really find fascinating about meditation, or just the practice of being aware, as simple as it is, to then act out of this awareness.
Interesting. That's it's so interesting how your criteria is not perfect in a way, but your criteria over your criteria is better than your criteria. What you want to do is one thing, and what you would want is another thing. And that second layer of abstraction gets you closer to what's good.
Exactly.
Knowing that if we did the 2 lists that I said before, the thing that you want to do and the thing that you would want, the list of the things that you would want would align much better with your long-term desires or objectives than the first list.
Absolutely, yes. And this awareness that you mentioned is something that helps you to, let's say, consciously and subconsciously drive you or guide you automatically to the things that you want in this matter of case, which is pretty crazy when I think about it now, how I am aware about it. Because speaking about awareness actually makes me more aware about it, which I didn't do for a long time. And when you layer it down, it is fascinating to hear about it. We wrote a point that what we pay attention to is our life, and this also crosses the things that we talked about now, that when we pay attention to a presence that we have right now, it is our life in general, that just the sheer presence of something is going to be determined by how you pay attention to it. This is really interesting.
A big part of how bad things are made bad because you pay attention to them. And knowing that allows you to pay less attention to them.
Exactly. This is something I noticed just recently in military, because we work with people that are well through life, which are definitely older than our fresh young people that are just began to work there. And what I noticed is that they are not aware about that something is bad for them, or they're not aware of this, but I am aware of it. And I mentioned it, but still they didn't believe me because they are not aware of it for themselves, and because they have this habit and this way of life, they never paid attention to it, that it is bad. They're so programmed to think about bad stuff. And as you said, that when you are paying attention to bad stuff, it's a bit false description to, let's say, bad decisions, bad ideas, bad desires. If you pay attention to them more and you are aware about them, you automatically get away from them without even like doing much. You act just out of the sheer awareness that you had before. We went so deep on that right now. I just noticed.
Yeah. In the moment you are aware of having the conscious thought of that thing being bad, you see yourself as a third person.
Exactly.
And in that moment, you separate yourself from the experience by introspection, and it allows you to suffer less. So the end of suffering comes from meditation.
It's one of the aspects that helps you to be more aware that, with this practice comes less suffering, that leads to more success, a better life, let's say, with less suffering. You still need suffering in some sense to succeed in certain points, which is
you need pain, not suffering.
Okay, now I have to think. Isn't pain suffering? What's the difference for you?
Pain is the physiological reaction that your body has to a situation that's not good. You get shot by an arrow and that creates pain in you. But the suffering comes when you think of how bad the situation is. The suffering only comes from the mental rumination of you thinking of, oh, I got shot by the arrow and now I'm not going to be able to provide to my family, and you get depressed. That's suffering. So that difference, if you are stoic enough, you will not suffer. You will only have pain. But suffering comes from a weak mind. I think. I'm not saying that my mind is strong in any way. I suffer a lot. But I'm just saying the definition.
Okay, so I think suffering does not entirely come from a weak mind, because let's say you get shot by an arrow. It's just an example. I think everybody will experience pain and also suffer, just because suffering is not determined by a strong and weak mind entirely. To a certain extent, yes. And so if you want to circle back to the topic we had before, if you want to have a good life where you have to, let's say, suffer less in the long term, you have to be in more pain in the short term. And pain does not mean physical pain necessarily, but I think mentally you will get, or physically you will be in uncomfortable situations that will cause you defined pain. Pain is subjective in this matter. Of course, if you get hit, let's say, with a fist in your face, this is physical pain. Obviously, this is not just subjective. But let's say if working out 4 times a week is causing you pain, this is subjective mentally, because in the long term it's going to benefit everyone. So this is just short-term experience, I think.
But the same pain, the same physiological experience can cause you suffering or not. If your arm hurts because you did too many bicep curls, or because your training was especially exhaustive, you will not suffer. You will just be satisfied with yourself by how much effort you put into the training. But if you suspect that you have a tumor in your arm, that will cause you a lot of suffering if you're not super strong mentally. So the same experience, I would argue, in one case caused you pain and suffering, and in the other one doesn't cause you suffering while there's still pain. But the amount of pain that you experience is also subject to your awareness. If you're able to put your flashlight, the flashlight of your attention, into something else that's not hurting, let's say your other arm is not hurting, and you pay attention to it instead of to the left, let's say the right one is the one which itches. So you put the attention to the left one, and that would make you have less pain because you're only able to perceive one thing at a time.
I think this is you can train that as you said with circle back to meditation, which is super interesting of how I think everything of what we discussed in this close up to 1 hour discussion is just determined by how determined are you to train your brain, because everything acts out of our brain, besides the situations we are put in, luckily or unlucky, in this matter. Yeah.
Let's finish off with brain plasticity. Do you think that we have a capacity to train ourselves to appreciate the things that we wish to wish? Or are we just determined to wish for the things that we happen to wish for?
I think we have unlimited capacity in this example you gave, or in this statement you gave me. I think we are free to wish as we wish, but we are also free to wish as we want. And in this case, we are free to wish to have as much unlimited capacity to train us in this matter as we want to wish. Yes. What do you think?
I think that you are partially right. There's a lot of room to improvement, and saying that there's not will decrease the amount of improvement that you can have. So believing that you can improve will actually make you improve more, so that you should be believing that there's a lot of room to improve.
Definitely. Yeah, I agree with you on that. But I think this is a great point where we can close here, because we found a really good let's say way of how we went through this awareness, discipline, meditation, focus or driven talk, while still being able to discuss certain aspects where we disagree, but still in the end we agreed on it anyway. So this has been really, really enjoyable.
Yeah, the same, Patrick. I really enjoyed this conversation. Hope to have another one in the future, maybe about one of the other topics that we have planned on talking about.
Definitely, absolutely. I'm in for it. So thank you for having me. It has been a pleasure, and keep it up with your podcast.